Oh, Sergey. And there's Eric.
So we're going to wait a bit because we had a total of about 50 people register for this, and some this morning. So I'm anticipating that we'll get up to around maybe 20 people coming in.
Yes. Thomas Patton.
Hey, Eric, looking good there.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Charles Hillier. Eric, is anything going on at the commission? Is anybody working there, or is everybody out?
You know, most are working remotely, but we do have some of the support staff that oversee accounting and some of the more administrative functions that are still there. You know, some of the functions where we haven't quite moved completely online yet.
All right. Oh, there's Fred. Good morning, Fred.
Let me do a quick tags. All right. Well, we do have this going live, and while a lot of us are here, I'm going to start recording this to the cloud.
Right.
And I'd like to, if everyone is curious right now, I'm just getting the live feed updated. And because everything now on my computer is using a lot more bandwidth, it's a little bit slower than I would like.
Ryan's got his hat on, so I'll put my hat on. You need a hat, Eric.
We typically, yeah.
One of the rules is you got to wear a hat.
Oh, okay. I think I got one right. Let me see what I can find.
And there's Dick Flask. Dick probably has his hat on. He usually does. There was a thing at the Capitol that I don't think even exists anymore. It was called the Derby Club. It was for legislators and lobbyists. You had to wear a derby.
Nice.
You got really criticized if you didn't have your derby on.
Did they have a derby hat competition?
I don't know. I was only at one of their meetings. It was definitely an old boys club. So God knows what they did.
All right, now we got 20 people in here, or more. I'm going to kick off this meeting.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome everybody. The first screen you guys see up here is just the Zoom controls and where kind of everything is, so you can pay attention to it. I'm going to share with you guys in the chat these slides so you can follow along with us as I test my ability to use everything. All right, so there's our slide, the chat, or in the chat you should see the slides. I'm going to post them again because 2 people just entered. And now let's get started. Welcome to CleanStart's To-Dos. CleanStart's To-Dos, these are just short, kind of twice a week web meetings where we check in with people in the energy and efficiency and sustainability fields, whether they're startups, people working in policy, entrepreneurs, basically everyone, to see, you know, what they're doing and what steps they're taking to move their business or their projects forward, and to give everyone suggestions of where they can look to connect and move their projects forward. So today we're going to have Erik Stokes from the Energy Commission. I'll introduce him a little bit more later. But first off, reminders for an effective meeting space. The number 1 is pay attention to your mute button. You might say something, and remember to put yourself back on mute so that way we don't catch a lot of the background noise. I want to thank our sponsors, Blue Tech Valley, SMUD, Sac State, and Weintraub Tobin. These are typically the sponsors of the Clean Tech meetups. But now that we're doing more virtual events, we're recognizing them as sponsors of the To-Dos. here's some announcements that are coming up. Our next to do is with Uptown Studios, founder and innovator and mover and shaker, Tina Reynolds, talking about how you can continue marketing during this time. One thing everyone's probably noticed is instead of in-person meetings, we're doing a lot of virtual meetings. This was something that everyone talked about was going to be, years in the future. Well, it's right now. So connecting with the virtual world and figuring out how to connect with your stakeholders virtually is really important. So I encourage people to go and attend that to do, so you can get some insights from a very active person in that marketing community. I'm sharing a link to that so you guys can go and sign up. Additionally, the CEO Crash Course is back. Applications are due May 20th. It's Mondays and Thursdays starting June 4th to June 29th. That's 8 Crash Course events. It is free. We do require a deposit, but it is a free Accelerator CEO Crash Course. I know Thomas Patton was in the last one with Airpool. I hope he got a lot of work out of a lot of support out of it. Do you have any comments on it, Thomas, you might want to say? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, no, I think it was really helpful to help us to focus on what we need to do to move the project forward and help us to identify maybe why we haven't been able to move forward. And that's kind of what I've been doing since then, actually, is trying to figure out a different way. And I think this COVID pandemic has totally changed the way we need to think about this business. So yeah, I thought it was some really great tools, some really great speakers that you guys brought in. So yeah, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. So
All right, thanks, Thomas.
this time we're going to have people from the Carlson Center talking about pivoting in the startup canvas. We're going to have people who run the Entrepreneurship Center at Sierra College and also work with the SAC Angels on that help with financial projections, prototyping and partnerships with manufacturers, a whole gamut of things, along with case studies on companies that have been through it and succeeded. Also, I want to call your attention to the Clean Tech Meetup and Startup SAC Happy Hour on the 26th of this month has Trifecta, a local company that's received investment from Moneta Ventures in the past year and is still going. So make sure to check that out and get all these on your list. If you're wondering, how do I stay connected with these? Well, connect with us socially. You can connect with our email, which just went out yesterday, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube channel, which has lots of videos, including 2 cool ones by Erik Stokes where he talks about additional ways to get connected. Our Instagram, we now have an intern, so we can actually do that, because even though I feel like I'm a pretty young guy, Instagram bewilders me. And our regular blogs on WordPress, I suggest you go check them out. We're constantly updating people on what's happening in the community and cool new companies. And always check out Startup SAC. If you click on them here, you can sign up for their newsletter, and Empower Innovation, which you're going to hear a little bit more about today. I'm going to click on it to show you guys kind of what it is. It is a place where you can get connected, and you can go and find me on it and CleanStart. So go and connect with us on Empower Innovation and connect with a lot of the stuff the CEC is doing. Hopefully I didn't steal too much of your content, Erik.
No, not at all. For the plug.
But these are the best ways to get connected. I'm going to share the slides one more time because I see more people have come in since then. These slides have all the links that you could need on it. And going forward, I would like to introduce Erik Stokes, Chief of the Energy Deployment and Market Facilitation Office. You might kind of say, well, what does that do? Well, if you're familiar with EPIC grants, if you're familiar with some of the architect RFPs and information they're seeking going out there, CalSeed, Cal Testbed, his department kind of is basically the one behind putting a lot of these programs out that get run by groups like New Energy Nexus, Blue Tech Valley, and Cyclotron Road. So without further ado, I'm going to invite him to speak or to talk about it. And if you need me to click to the next slides, just say next slide, please, and I will click, Erik.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, and thanks for inviting me on to kind of talk a little bit about some of the CEC's programs that are really targeted towards supporting clean energy entrepreneurship. I think one of the things when we look ahead towards some of these pretty ambitious state policy goals on the energy and GHG reduction side, it's hard to see how we're going to get there without clean energy startup space being successful. Most of the larger corporations over the past couple of decades have really changed their models. They don't really invest much in the R&D space. Instead, they've mostly taken on a model where, they're looking to make strategic investments in acquisitions and startup companies. The challenge, I think a lot of the startup companies know all too well is, where's that capital? Where's that support going to come from? That's going to bring them to a stage if, they're trying to kind of grow into their own organization and business. How are they going to attract, either VC investment, if they're going to try to, do a licensing play to a larger corporation, they need to be able to get to that stage. And so, one of the things we've really tried to set up over the past few years is to really try to design a series of programs and funding initiatives and support services to really try to stage gate these companies with their technologies through kind of this proverbial innovation pipeline. So maybe go to the next slide. I'm trying to remember kind of a little bit. So so this is, as Thomas mentioned earlier. Oh, thank you. So this is kind of a visualization of kind of the series of programs we've set up to really streamline new technologies, all the way through the pipeline to the stage where at least they're starting to develop their pilot production stage. For most of our startup companies, CalSeed's really kind of that first touch point. And as you mentioned, it's kind of that first bit of small grant funding at the proof of concept stage. What we've seen from a lot of the companies that have received CalSeed funding is, that's been IP that's been incubated at a national lab or a university, or maybe spun out from a larger corporation, and people, the founders went on their own to really try to develop a product based on their experience. And so CalSeed's kind of that first little bit of funding where if they're successful, they get up to $150,000. It helps really bring them into kind of a broader network and ecosystem of support services. One of the things we do is, we fund typically around 25 to 30 companies each year, get that kind of first stage of CalSeed funding. It's competitive. This is usually around an applicant pool of 200 to 300. So, only about 10 to 15%, are successful at that first stage. But we have a kind of a plus up stage with CalSeed. So if they're successful getting that first $150,000, then they can kind of apply through a business plan competition that the Clean Tech Open hosts for us in the fall timeframe. And if they're successful there, they have the opportunity for an additional $450,000 to really try to get that low fidelity prototype up and running. We just stood up a new program called Cal Testbed a couple months ago, and we had our first application period for this new program. And it's really trying to open up access for startup companies at some pretty prestigious testing and laboratory facilities, specifically at this first wave, the UC campuses, as well as Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And so what this will allow is companies that apply, they're able to get a voucher, and with that voucher, they can essentially get access to one of the eligible testing facilities to be able to, really tap into some state-of-the-art equipment as well as the expertise at these institutions. A couple programs that we kind of run on an annual basis that are going to be, we're going to have our next iteration of pretty soon is our Bridge program. This is kind of really it's kind of a plus up program for companies. Maybe they've received previous funding either from the Energy Commission, either from the federal government. They're really ready to take that next stage. They're starting to get some interest from the private sector. And so Bridge is kind of a streamlined approach for them to, start to move up into higher funding levels, typically within that 1 to 5 million stage. One of the things, we really try to do with Bridge is we're trying to incentivize private sector investment in these companies. And so you'll see when we release this new funding opportunity for Bridge, the Energy Commission takes on the bulk of the funding, but we do require the companies have received some sort of private sector investment Doesn't have to be from a VC. It can be angel investment. It can't be public funding, but it can be investment from a nonprofit to kind of cover that cost share. And what we're looking for is really some signals from the private sector that they see some potential in this technology. Our last touch point with a lot of these startup companies, we'll be having our second cohort, applications for our second cohort coming up soon, is our RAMP program. And this is the stage for companies, maybe they've done a few pilot demonstrations with their technology, but they really need to take that next step and scale up their production so they can go from producing a few units a week to something more akin to what they need to meet customer demand. And so this really this helps provide that technical and financial assistance to move to typically what we refer to as manufacturer readiness level 8. Essentially, it's the pilot production stage. It's somewhere between you're designing and developing custom prototypes versus full scale production. It's kind of that milestone towards starting to move towards full production. And then along the way, as you alluded to earlier, there's a lot of pitfalls startup companies can make kind of in this journey. And so, we've really developed kind of a statewide network of incubator type programs to make sure they have access to the right people, to the right facilities, to help guide them through some common mistakes that we've seen over the years with clean tech companies. So that's kind of the quick overview, I should say.
Let's see. So you had some to-dos here on how people can connect. And I think these are actually some pretty good ones because I'm always surprised about that people don't know about them. So you want to kind of outline them for us?
Yeah, sure.
So why each one's important?
Yeah. So the programs and the initiatives I've talked about are just kind of a streamlined approach for clean energy entrepreneurship. On top of that, through the EPIC program, also through our natural gas R&D program, we're constantly releasing new funding opportunities. So you just saw kind of a piece of the overall R&D programs at the CEC. And so one of the best ways to kind of stay up to date about new funding opportunities that are coming out, new events that the CEC may be holding, including webinars. We're moving, given the COVID-19 pandemic, we're moving away from physical events and forums to virtual forums. And so we have a few of those planned that we're going to be posting pretty soon. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to register on our platform, Empower Innovation. And on Empower Innovation, it's not just the CEC's funding opportunities, but we pull from federal opportunities, other state funding opportunities, and really try to curate that for folks that are interested in applying. There's also kind of a features and functionality where you can try to identify partners that may, in submitting proposals. Maybe you're a technology developer, you're looking for a host site to demonstrate your technology. And so the platform has some built-in functionality to really try to enable those partnerships. The other piece of advice is to sign up for the EPIC listservs, and this will really kind of ping you on any new funding opportunities that come out from EPIC, any new events, results that are coming from the program. It can get a little bit overwhelming with the number of listserv blasts, so it's one of those things you just have to kind of delve through and see if there's something that's of interest to you.
Excellent. So I've got a question for you. So earlier we were talking about a lot of these came out of the valley, kind of this valley of death that was seen. And we talked about how a lot of the investment from the CEC has created basically a whole bunch of smaller valleys. And then you mentioned that it seemed like they are kind of going back to how it was before. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, when we first, this kind of idea of the innovation pipeline first originated, there was one valley of death, which they called the technological valley of death. And then about the time that we were creating the EPIC program, Bloomberg New Energy Finance came out with a report that identified two valleys of death, the technological valley of death and the commercial valley of death. And then since then, they've added a third valley of death that they refer to as the market expansion valley of death. It's a nice framework. It's a good way to communicate kind of the role of public funding. I think in our experience, what we see is it's just one big valley of debt. There's really no, there's not a way to really be that specific in targeting funding towards different stages. And typically what we see from most of our startup companies, they're trying to cobble together as many grant funding as they can to really try to, make it to that next month, that next year, till they get to the stage where, they're really ready to start to sell their product to the commercial sector, where they're able to really start to attract some significant private sector investment.
I see, I think Thomas Patton has his hand up. You want to ask a question, Thomas?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if this is maybe this is an Eric question, maybe not, but I'm just curious if the Empower Innovation group is focused on the kinds of innovations that CEC focuses on, which seems to be really in the electrification realm for the most part for ratepayers. Does Empower Innovation kind of mirror that, or is that more expanded than that?
Yeah, the Empower Innovation is a little more expanded than that. It doesn't just cover our EPIC program, it covers our gas program. I think the thing we look for with Empower Innovation is that it's consistent with kind of the broader state energy policy goals. There's a big focus on decarbonization, but for the most part, it's pretty broad and expansive.
Thanks.
I think if there's some connection, if there's a connection to clean tech, if it's water, could be more on the ag side, then we typically include it in Empower Innovation.
And
Yeah,
Eric, on the slide there of the ramp and bridge and everything like that, the innovation clusters were mentioned, and you've had those going on for about 4 years now. What's the thinking at the commission about renewing the innovation clusters or expanding that?
Yeah, it's something we're considering. I think we're working through the mechanics of how best to do that. One of the things with EPIC is there's some statutory requirements that require us to competitively award all projects. So I think we're trying to figure out kind of a pathway, but we've seen a lot of success from this program. One of the metrics we look at was our initial investment in the ecosystem, what we call the ecosystem in general, especially the first phase one, which was CalSeed in the 4 innovation clusters, and how much follow-on funding companies that have been supported by the ecosystem have done. And so we're already at a 5-to-1 ratio where these companies have attracted, 5 times as much funding as we invested, and we expect that number to continue to grow.
Good news. Other questions from people?
I have one from the chat from Thomas Caraganis. New Energy Nexus says CalSeed review is almost complete. When we hear about our results, given the current state of the economy, months before finding out about funding could prove difficult. Have you heard about it being delayed at all, or would you direct questions to New Energy Nexus?
I would direct questions to New Energy Nexus. Typically, just based on previous CalSeed cycles, it's typically around June that the results are complete and ready to be published after they've gone through the CEC process.
And I would say I don't think I have heard anything from New Energy Nexus about CalSeed being delayed. I know Cal Testbed had its application period expanded, but CalSeed I haven't heard anything about them changing the schedule on that. Have you, Gary?
No, they're on schedule. I think Eric's advice is pretty good in terms of public announcements in June.
Yeah. So you can check them out at calseed.fund. I'll put their link in there too.
Just for context there, they just posted on Twitter saying that their technological review is almost complete and that they would be sending the highest scoring companies on to the CEC. And they said announcements at the end of summer was what they were hoping for. And so I was just curious, are they going to announce who for those companies who are at the bottom who are unlikely to get obviously they don't really want to announce until after the CEC has said specifically who they're going to fund. But for those companies who may not be near the top, then they need to be seeking other funding companies, and 4 months of waiting for CalSeed funding might be kind of rough. That's all I was asking.
One thing because I do remember similar questions coming up during the CalSeed programs that we had put on, where it was because they asked if you've received any significant funding, because significant funding would disqualify you from getting CalSeed award. When asked if in between that time, if you got significant funding, would it disqualify you? They implied that it would not.
Okay.
They didn't give a hard or solid answer. But if you also get a significant funding, you might go and email them and let them know and ask if that affects anything. So then they can have that discussion, but they don't have a specific thing saying, oh, you went out and fundraised during this time, you're now completely excluded.
Okay.
So that would be a good one, because it's very, very case specific what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone should stop trying to fundraise.
Yeah, obviously.
I think Eric would probably be the first to tell you never count on a grant. So I also want to, do you have any, I know CalSeed has done a lot of epic investments actually around the Sacramento area, including Terzo Power. And from what I've heard from people at the CEC, Terzo Power has done a very good job with their grant. I guess either you're doing a good job or you're not. Is there any comments that you have that you're like, hey, Terzo Power did a very good job in working with the CEC this way?
I haven't, I know I've heard good things about Terzo Power from our staff that oversees those projects. Nothing specific that I'm aware of on kind of advice or guidance or what I've heard around Terzo Power. So yeah, nothing I can really speak to on that front.
Yeah, we've also had Sergey Vasilyev on the phone here, and they've gotten a couple successful grants from the Energy Commission, and so at any rate, we've got some good success stories in the region. I would encourage everybody to give CalSeed a shot. It's a good opportunity, but the cycle is a year long, and we're just coming to the end of the announcements of the first phase. In the fall, associated with the Clean Tech Open, there'll probably be the follow-on competition for the $450,000 grants, and then applications will open again in February, March of next year. But I think it's unique in the States as to what's going on here, and it's really helped a lot of companies get launched. So staying in touch with this Empower Innovation Network is such a good advance, because a lot of that information is very scattered. So I think we all
I want to interrupt you a bit there and call on Dick Flask, because he has his hand up.
okay.
In the physical world, not the digital one. And Dick, you guys have gotten a CalSeed award.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yes, I was going to make one comment and had one question. The comment was that we are a CalSeed Concept awardee from last year, and the way that it worked last year was in the June timeframe. We were informed that we would be put forward to the commission for a final vote, and it was in August when the official word came out that we had been approved by the commission. So in terms of timing, I think that's probably what you can expect this time around. And we have been inducted into the Clean Tech Open. We are competing for the CalSeed prototype funding this fall. So we're looking forward to that. Erik, I was wondering if you could give just a little more information on the bridge and the ramp programs. I had not heard much about those before, a little bit, but not much.
Sure. Yeah, so we had our first cohort for bridge and ramp back in, I think for bridge it was maybe 2018, and for ramp it was last year around 2019. And so we're going to be opening up applications for the next cohort for both of those programs, probably in the next month or so. And so I think Gary brought up Sergey and Lucent Optics. You know, they've been kind of a good example of a company that started off in CalSeed, then they took that next step into Bridge. You know, kind of a little bit differences between CalSeed and Bridge. With Bridge, one of the things we're doing is we're going to have application periods on a quarterly basis instead of an annual basis. With that comes a little bit higher requirements to kind of be able to apply, including you know, some private sector investment within the last 12 months, you know, a little bit of some cost share required, as well as, you know, some previous success with government award. That can be CalSeed, it can be, you know, an award from the Department of Energy, or it can be National Science Foundation. We've even seen, you know, kind of our first cohort of Bridge, it kind of spanned the range of federal grants, including DARPA, NSF, DOE, ARPA-E. So yeah, just stay tuned for that one. Funding sizes are, you know, quite a bit bigger than CalSeed, typically in the 1 to 3 million range, can even extend up to 5 million. And then RAMP, like I said, this one, you know, it's really only applicable for companies that are developing kind of a hard tech product that can manufacture. So we don't really have categories for your more kind of machine learning, AI space, software algorithms. It's really for those that are developing a physical product. But we had our first one a year ago. You know, we had a really strong set of companies that applied a lot of really innovative technologies in the storage space, as well as a couple on the efficiency side and the renewable generation side.
And what size were those grants?
Those were, they ranged from $1 to $5 million. Yeah.
And
So
those generally require private cost sharing also?
The RAMP doesn't require private cost share. We do require a cost share. I think one of the other things we're planning to do in RAMP, so similar to CalSeed, where people apply based on their geographic region, we're going to do something similar with RAMP this go around. So if you're in the Sacramento area, you'll kind of apply to the Central Valley group. If you're in the Bay Area, you'll apply to the Bay Area group, similar to kind of how we've set up CalSeed.
Yeah, so stay connected on Empower and do CleanStart on that. Chris White, I know you had a question. Chris White from Frontier Energy has a lot of experience in these areas too.
I was going to ask you all for information, actually. As you may know, we're working with the Energy Commission and Gladstein Neandros to put on the EPIC symposiums and forums. And the first symposium, which was supposed to be April 1st, included a technical assistance workshop for folks like you to understand the mechanics or best practices of applying for government funding or reporting it, as well as working with the SBA or going through some other opportunities. The way in which we had designed that to happen is not going to transfer very well online. So not today, but I would love for you all to send me an email or send it to Thomas and he can forward it to me about what technical pieces of information would be really helpful that could be communicated through a webinar or an online session that would help you be successful in understanding how to apply for money. And once you get the money, how to report the money and what things you have to keep track of in records, because the reporting is often a trip up for small companies. So that's all I wanted to say.
Do you mind if we share your email in the chat?
Sure.
Okay. I'll get that in there. I put your LinkedIn one in there initially, but I'll get that in there. So Erik Stokes, register an Empower Network. It's a great way to get updated on what's happening. And the EPIC listserv, it is critical that you get on that and other CEC listservs. It is a lot of emails that come out, but they are very relevant. And because you need to know about the entire thinking that's kind of happening at the CEC, because they have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people giving them feedback. And if you're not familiar with everyone that's part of it, it becomes a lot harder to write a solicitation for a grant or to understand why they ask certain questions in it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go on.
Thomas, you know, a lot of times we'll do a funding opportunity and people will come to us, you know, after the funding opportunity has been released and ask, you know, if this technology is eligible or have we considered this? one of the things you'll get from the Epic listserv is not every funding opportunity we release, but a lot of them will do some sort of, request for feedback or a webinar to help us, really try to further scope what the funding opportunities should be, what we should consider. And so you also kind of stay on the lookout for those, because that's really kind of your opportunity a lot of times to kind of state your case for why something, a technology or a project should be considered in one of these funding opportunities.
And you can go and ask questions at those events that they have. And then they also post them afterwards and share them through the listserv too. So you can go and get copies of whatever presentations happen there. It's a great resource. Now in this time, it's really important that we stay connected and that you can keep promoting your company. So next time we're having Tina Reynolds, Chief Juggler of Uptown Studios. They're a local marketing firm. Kira Reed on our board is head of their digital marketing there. And it's like I was talking about before, we've all moved online to this digital world. And when social distancing is, rescinded or new guidance is given, a lot of this virtual world is going to stay. CleanStart's going to continue doing these half-hour kind of updates and check-ins because we're finding them to be really useful. But if you're a company and you need to figure out how to connect with your stakeholders, this is a really good one to go to. So make sure that you attend that. I'm going to put the link to it in there so you can sign up.
Yeah, Tina, if you don't know her, she's one of the most creative people around and a joy to watch. Anybody that would call themselves a chief juggler for the company they own has got to be creative. So this will be a very enjoyable session.
Yeah. And I also want to thank everyone for attending. Again, there's slides in there. You can click on the links. Check out the CEO crash course. It's it's a free accelerator. You heard Thomas endorse it there. Come to our next Clean Tech meetup on electrification. Later or next week after Tina Reynolds, Helios Altas, Mike Carroll is going to be talking about his Powerball, which is a small scale hydro power wheel that he's starting to deploy and manufacture, and followed at the end of the week by Eco Alpha. They are a training center for helping people get jobs in clean energy. So you can learn about how you can connect with the community better to find employees and to find projects that you can get funded through these job training programs. I'm really looking forward to that one. And I see we have people from Blue Tech Valley here, so I wanted to share with them. I made a background that I was thinking about doing. So I wanted to see what you guys thought about it. Oh, well, it's kind of works. Turning on every single light that I have.
Yeah. I would say more work needed, but we're working on that. So Hella, thank you very much for joining. Is there any comment you wanted to offer?
Thank you. No, I just saw a little bit of the back wall there. I liked it, but
there we go.
Thank you for all the, yeah, there you go. Now I can't see you though. Well, well, just I want to thank you for putting this on, and also thanking you just for being great partners with the Blue Tech Valley. We really appreciate all you're doing. And thank you, Erik, as well, for making yourself available to present all this great information. We think it's such a great program with a lot of opportunity, and we hope the entrepreneurs see that as well, which I think a lot of you do. And as Thomas mentioned, the CEO crash course is the next thing coming up. So hopefully a lot of you will take advantage of that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Hella. Erik, thanks very much for all that you've done. We really appreciate the expansion of the Energy Commission program with a focus on actually paying attention to how companies grow, develop, and succeed in injecting capital and grants at just the right moment. So with that, Thomas, anything else?
I just want to call people's attention that if you really like these little free things that we give on along with our Clean Tech meetups, which we don't charge anyone for, to go ahead and support CleanStart. I'm going to drop a link in the chat there. So if you want to support us through it, go ahead.
Yeah, we really appreciate your support, particularly in this time when everything else is drying up. And we are hoping to put on our annual showcase in the fall. I know, Chris, you're eager to put on the Epic Symposium too. But we'd like to have 25 of the companies regionally here exhibiting like they did the last time. It was a lot of fun. It was very informative. We had a lot of people attending, I think over 250. But we've got to pay attention to what the governor is saying about whether we can gather that number of people together or not. So we're keeping our eye on that, and hopefully we'll be able to see you in person this year.
Hey, Thomas and Gary, are you guys on the big day of giving?
We are not.
We're not. We'll probably do something apart from that. We have been on it in the past as SARTA, Chris. It really hasn't been effective for organizations such as ours. It's more for your traditional charities that tend to do that. So, but thanks for the thought. We'll have our little dog, our little day of giving later.
But Gary, people can still give on the big day of giving to CleanStart to help support this wonderful organization, right?
Absolutely. Contributions, donations, cheerfully accepted at any time, Brian.
We are a 501c3, so we are a nonprofit. So if anyone's curious about that, I just shared with us our PayPal and that we're a 501c3. And if you're going to do a donation and need any documents, supporting documents on that, just ask. I want to thank everyone for coming, encourage you guys to come to the next one and ask your how do you connect digitally with people questions. I'm going to stop doing the virtual background.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a mess. Yeah.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time with like all these lights and yeah. But I attend that with Tina Reynolds. And I'm going to leave this up if anyone wants to just kind of talk and network at the end, but I'm going to be ending the live stream about now and ending the recording. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.